Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the second, or actually third technically, session of the Fed Principles with Daisa Enterprises. We are excited to have everybody here today. And Maham and Rochelle are with us from Daisa. And we'll go ahead and get started.
Hi all, welcome. Happy to be sharing this space with you again, just so that we have a guiding byline for our workshop 3 and our final Fed workshop together. I wanted to let you know that this session will be really about recognizing how Fed has been a shared language for things that we already share. Principles, values, things that are a common compass for us. And we'll use this session, to try and understand how everything at the granular level in y'all's programs can be a connective set of values for your network-wide participation, or how OCFSN as a network, as a coalition, can support your grassroots work, your on-the-ground work. So just for folks who aren't familiar with me, maybe haven't attended other sessions, I'm Maham Rizvi, pronouns she, they. I'm a produce prescription specialist at Daisa Enterprises, and with some amazing humans over the past 3 years, we have been developing the Fed principles, fidelity, equity, and dignity in produce prescription programs. What we're going to cover today is we'll start with a recall exercise. It'll be our version of an icebreaker, and it'll be an opportunity to touch base on what we spoke about in workshop 2 at the March 13th session. If you weren't in that session, feel free to flag if there's any holes in your understanding, and we can always verbally talk through them or offer more context. We'll do some peer-to-peer learnings in breakout rooms, have a moment to come back to the main Zoom room and have sharebacks with each other. And then we'll have spaciousness for some discussion and open-ended talking at the end with a poll as well. So to get us started, I'm just going to remind folks, you will need the Fed Community Workbook for this session. If you don't have it already, feel free to download the file either by using your phone and taking a photo of this QR code, traveling to this website and following the download form, or one of my colleagues will share the PDF file in the chat and you can download that directly to your desktop. But we will be referencing that back again. Thank you, Rochelle. And now we're going to slide into our recall activity. Just for a flag, if folks could use the Zoom reaction tool to indicate if you were at the workshop 2 March 13th session, and I'll just visually get a sense. You can pick any reaction emoji that you want. Okay, one person, great. Thank you, Amber. Jennifer, Kaylee, Marcy, Elle. Mary, thank you, thumbs down. Okay, and actually a significant amount of you that weren't at the workshop 2. So I'll just keep in mind that this particular exercise is definitely referencing back workshop 2, but for anyone who wasn't there, facilitators, all of us, your peers in this room can bridge that gap, certainly. So for those who were there, if you could just think back to that session and the breakout rooms that you were in at the time, we were using the Fed Community Workbook, and you all were in breakout rooms that focused on a specific touch point. The touch points being the different cycles of a produce prescription program. Either you were in recruitment and eligibility screening, or program management, or data evaluation and collection. And with your group, you all talked through which of the criteria that were listed in that section of the workbook that you and your program related to. And that there's a legend, a guide in the community workbook that asks you to represent each criteria. If it's something your program already implements, write an asterisk. If it's something that's not relevant to your program, write an X. And if it's something that you feel aligned with, but your program does not do yet currently, represent it with an exclamation point. I'm just sharing this to help refresh our memories since it's been a couple weeks. But what I'm interested to know is, do you remember how many criteria you realized that you already implement, you already exhibit in your programs? That's what I'd love to know. And if you can take a minute to recall, and if it's helpful, bring up the community workbook and go to the touch point that you were assigned to last time, you self-assigned to, and skim through the criteria listed, and just come off mute and share with us like, oh yeah, like my program does this criteria written here already. And we would love to know how your program does it. You could just a minute for reflection, and then I'll poke a few of you to see if you're willing to share.
I'm happy to get us started and memory kind of jogged if that's helpful.
Thank you,
I
Kate.
was in a breakout with Lucia from Adelante Mujeres, and our touch point was around nutrition and culinary education, and looking at the different fidelity, equity, and dignity principles within the education and culinary education. And Lucia, I feel like when she was talking about her program, there was a lot of the asterisks on that page, and a lot of exclamation points to say, like, we might be doing some of these things, but there's a whole lot more that we would love to expand and implement in our program, or even just kind of deepen and further within that. But one of the pieces that Lucia shared, and feel free to unmute yourself, Lucia, if you want to share directly, but was talking about using like cultural icons in like pop culture that would be familiar with the participants as a starting point to talk about nutrition, and that, you know, nutrition, like diets, like there's so many kind of, when we bring up that term, right, it's like, we're talking about protein and carbohydrates, and but bringing up these like funny, humorous cultural characters that everybody knows and laughs about is like a way to break the ice and really think about engaging participants in a fun, like, way that like looking at fidelity, right? And within that category and engagement and activities that are fun and celebratory and keep people engaged and kind of that community, social connection and cohesion that's brought about when we're talking about things that make us laugh, as a starting point to talk for these topics. And Lucia, feel free to share more if you want to elaborate on that.
Thank you, Kaylee. Yes, we've been doing a lot of that this time. We using characters from the Latino community, and we use them in a fictitious story, a mock case studies and know this La India Yuridia, she wants to be vegan because she wants to lose weight, or so and so is stressed and but he eats a lot of fast food because it's cheaper and it's easier, and it's been fun, but also it brings a lot of interaction and they are more willing to share their stories, and we had a lot of fun, but the conversation is easier and flowing when we do that.
Thank you for sharing that, Lucia and Kaylee. And just for a little context for folks who didn't get to attend session 2, workshop 2, and deep dive into the workbook, would one of you be willing to read which criteria you're referring to from the workbook? And if just share with us, it's under the touch point of nutrition and culinary education. And is it an example of dignity? Isn't it an example of fidelity? Do you remember?
I feel like, and Lucia, I feel like we talked about this one under, so nutrition, culinary education, and this is, if you're looking on the workbook, we're on page 18.
Yes. And I think it's ownership, and it's under fidelity, ownership, community culture barriers, and artists are including important designs, promotion, and celebration.
Thank you, Lucia. And do you know if that was under dignity? I'm so sorry if you said it and I missed it.
Yeah, under fidelity.
Under fidelity. Okay. So that in further context for folks who haven't gotten a chance to deep dive into the workbook takes each touch point within a produce-specific program, analyzes some general things that happen under that touch point. So what happens under nutrition and culinary education, and tries to identify specific examples that fidelity, equity, and dignity could look like when coming up with nutrition and culinary education programming. So the one Lucia just read is an example that exemplifies fidelity by adding celebration to the programming. And Lucia, you shared that at Hablando Mujeres, you have this culturally relevant way of bringing up case studies for the culinary and nutrition education materials you all use.
Correct. Yes.
That's really awesome. Thank you for sharing that. One more person, anyone else willing to share if this kind of helps refresh your memory? And you're willing to bring up one criteria that you identified that you already do.
I can hop in for my group from last time. And sorry, I'm sick, everyone. So let me know if you can't hear me. But I was in a group with Michelle of Farmer RX and Amber, who doesn't run a program but works within healthcare, and Carla from Adelante Mujeres, and we talked about evaluation and data collection. And some of the big things that we were like celebrating and learning from one another was the use of an integration into electronic medical records and different kinds of technology, and the importance of and attention to leveraging technology in a way that helps customize and connect with community members rather than exploit or disconnect from community members. And looking at page 20, the places where I think we really touched on these specific fidelity points was the first one in under fidelity, attention to reduction of burden on patients for data gathering. So figuring out ways to simplify and only have kind of one touch point for that need to put in information. number 2, which is privacy. So making sure that all of that information is protected in ways that ensure that the information is just being shared with the right people. And 5, which is ownership. And making and the ways that Michelle was talking about in their already existing technology, and Carla was talking about in technology that they're building with Salesforce, thinking about how that information gets shared back to the participants, so it's not just being extracted, but can serve them for their own learnings and goal settings.
Yes, thank you, Rochelle. And if anyone else from your team is on the call and wants to add, feel free to hop off mute and say anything you feel. Okay, well, I am grateful to the folks willing to share, and for anyone whom this isn't familiar with yet, feel free to put any of your questions in the chat, and folks who were there can definitely fill in any gaps, but hopefully along the way, so things will make sense. Just sorry, I should have shared this at the top of the exercise, but for anyone who didn't see what the community workbook looks like, this is an example of one of the pages, the touch point being participant recruitment and eligibility. And this is an example of how one program manager for a produce prescription program filled out hers and identified what their program already does with an asterisk, what their program will not find relevant with an X, and what their program aspires to do with an exclamation point. So a few of us, some of the OCFSN working group members and Rochelle and myself got a chance to debrief after workshop 2 session and kind of distill what did we learn from that. And the main things being that many of you throughout Oregon, running programs or not, in your work, you found significant alignment with the details of the Fed Community Workbook. The criteria or the examples of fidelity, equity, and dignity aligned with you all, either because you notice that you already do the things named in the workbook, or because there are things you've been thinking about doing, things that you feel aligned with, but haven't necessarily implemented yet. And none of you mentioned that the workbook has stuff that just does not have a place in your work. So that feels incredible. We also flagged that many of you brought up in the sharebacks and in the breakout room discussions, once you were able to identify criteria that you felt aligned with, but didn't necessarily implement in your work, you were curious on how to go about implementing it. What is the next step? Is there a guide to figuring out what to do? For example, if you want to reduce the burden of surveying your patient participants, what are some of the specific strategies folks utilize? And our hope for this session is that we can spend some time teaching each other, that all of us in the room, our collective experience, whether we know exactly how to do something or whether we have instincts on how to do something, can be a resource for each other. And so we're gonna go into peer-to-peer learning session in our breakout rooms. We'll set this up. This whole activity will be about a half hour, and we'll set up the first round, dividing us into 2 breakout rooms, focusing on 2 different programmatic touch points of a produce prescription program. And these correspond to what lives in the Fed Community Workbook. So in room 1, there'll be data collection and evaluation. And in room 2, there will be program management. And we'll assign, this time we won't self-assign, so that folks potentially get placed in a topic they didn't necessarily get to touch on last time. And for those of you who are new, it'll all be fresh. And within your 15-minute breakout room, what I'd like you all to do is pull up the Fed Community Workbook to the specific touch point corresponding to the breakout room you're in, and skim some of the criteria, and make a list of any of the criteria, or maybe just a tally, a count of the criteria that you feel aligned with, but have not yet implemented or don't know how to implement more specifically. And share that back with your peers in the room. And my hope is that if someone can identify there's a criteria they would love to do, either with an eligibility screener or with nutrition education curriculum, that there might be other people in the room who can offer advice or examples or have their own experience to share. And it can be an open-ended share and advice giving session amongst us all. And then we'll give you a warning when the 15 minutes is coming to a close, and we'll come back to the main room, take a breath, and put you all back into different breakout rooms for round 2 with different topics: prescription redemption and prescription provided. And we'll do the same thing there. We'll go to that section of the community workbook. We'll mentally or physically tally how many criteria we feel aligned with but don't know how to implement. We'll verbalize it to each other, and we'll crowdsource feedback and advice or examples of how to implement. After that, we'll come back to the main room and have a share back session with everyone. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Kaylee. And are we ready to launch into breakout rooms?
I think Jen's queuing it up here. Just a second.
Wonderful. See you all there. Wonderful. How was that, everyone? Feel free to just use your reaction tool on the Zoom if that feels easier and less taxing right now, but just some indication. Okay, a few thumbs up. Nice. Okay, we're just getting our feet wet, so I hope even if you weren't able to get like deep into rich conversation, we're gonna do round 2 shortly. I'm just gonna pull back up the topics. One moment. Our next 2 breakout room options will be prescription redemption and prescription provided sections. And Jen, if you don't mind assisting again in placing all of us, and it'll be the same thing. Bring up the Fed Community Workbook, or one of the note takers can share screen and surface the criteria that you feel are really aligned with your principles, but potentially hard to implement. And we'll see if we can identify how to advise each other or shared experience. Just give a second.
And if there are 2 folks in your program or 2 people participating from the same program and you want to be in different groups, feel free to, you can join the main room and then Jen or I can reassign you back to the other group so that you can kind of doubly participate in both of them. And I think, Jen, you're working to get us in those groups? Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Oh, here we go.
Maham, you're on mute.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I know it probably didn't feel like enough time to get into the thick of it for anything, but I hope the spark has at least been catalyzed, that there are things in this workbook that will not work for your circumstances, will be too much of a lift for your team's capacity, don't need to be a priority right now, but you can be resources for each other if someone else has figured out implementing one method that exemplifies some of these criteria, and you feel like, oh, you know what, yeah, like next year when we have a new hire, we'll have a little bit more capacity, I'll reference that person again and ask them how they did it. That's our hope for this session, because you all are the resource, and this tool, this workbook is just one set of language to communicate things we all already do. I'm going to open it up to sharebacks. Let me just get us back to a cute little deck. Would anyone be willing to come off mute for the 4 different groups and summarize some of the things that you heard surfaced in your group? Maybe I'll just call out prescription provided. And anyone willing to come off mute and share just a snapshot of some of the criteria y'all covered or advice you gave to each other or wherever you landed?
Yeah, this is Marcy. So in prescription provided, we talked a lot about the community trust and important of building that trust, and how each program has people that we're working to serve that have like traumas or harms or things that have occurred to them, and how we can help our program to be as trustworthy as possible, and to develop the relationships that we need to develop with those who maybe have already established relationships or who have credibility in that community.
Thank you, Marcy.
I
Anyone?
can add,
Oh, yeah.
I was just gonna add something that was really powerful to hear from me, and both Marcy and Lucia shared this in the produce provided group, um, around kind of this concept of like a buddy system and really leaning on other parts of community, whether it's people who are a part of the program or whether it's people who are from a local church or the school system or some other community resource that is a person that engages with a new person in a program, whether it's to help them with transportation or to pick up their produce for them or to be somebody who they can ask questions to. We didn't get into the details of all of the roles that person plays, but it was really cool to hear to me, like Marcy, as you talk about that trust building, like finding people and kind of playing matchmaker in some way, shape, or form, so that people are going through the process of onboarding and starting to receive that, receive the program with support, and that doesn't all have to land on both like capacity wise doesn't have to land on your programs, and also like trust can come from so many different places. So just thought that was really beautiful and brilliant.
Thank you for that ad, Rochelle. Anyone from data collection and evaluation willing to share? Okay, y'all, I'll go. If anyone along the way feels like chiming in, please cut me off. We would love to hear your voice instead. But in data collection and evaluation, folks surfaced that there's multiple things listed under the criteria there that feel good in theory, like data privacy for patients, yes, but feel potentially not possible, maybe even antithetical to then a later criteria that said there should be a direct feedback loop to patient participants for their own data. And how could a hospital group reconcile that, or any healthcare entity, because it's so complicated dealing with HIPAA laws and data sharing. And just one small thing we surface is that will be universally hard and really may not work for most people's circumstances to be able to do both. But we have seen one or two examples of it in the field, and they do take a lot of relationship building and a lot of convincing champions within institutions. And one that we saw was a hospital convinced hospital administration to spend the money and the time, 2 years almost, to update their internal electronic health record system, their patient portal, to include the produce prescription program, so that everyone that enrolled in the program, which happened to be children, parents could see on the patient portal their kids' biometrics in correspondence with how often they received their produce prescription. That was one I got, but definitely very hard section. Okay. How about, I need a refresher actually on what were the, oh yes, program management.
I can give a summary if no one else wants to jump up. So program management, we had a couple of people that had to step away, and then we like reshuffled the room so there weren't that many people, but we were a mighty small group here. We talked about fidelity, the number one engagement, and talking about having high level like admin championing of the program. But one piece of advice there was creating an MOU with partners, so that even if like some of the current champions stepped away or got a new job, or their roles shifted or whatever, that there would still be kind of a document to make sure that the program would continue on, and that people could new champions could be built from having that formal documentation of the program to understand it better. And we also talked about under equity, accessibility. And this actually got a little bit into evaluation, but understanding like, how do we measure the benefit for the whole family? Because currently a lot of programs are tied to just one member of the family, but we know that, anecdotally, and probably personally for most of us too, we share family and we share meals with our family and food with our family. And so some of these, the benefits of the program go beyond just the individual that was originally enrolled in the program for whatever health condition they have. And so one idea that came out of that is asking these more broader questions, self-reporting, that don't necessarily fall under like the regulations around HIPAA, but feelings of well-being, and that participants can self-report, like, how has this impacted their entire family? And then the last point that we had a chance to talk about was under dignity and accessibility, and using visuals and pictures versus reducing the number of words that are actually in printed materials, so that folks that are either don't speak English, or in this case Spanish, for the program, that they're still able to understand the information and the recipes that are being used. And for folks that speak Indigenous languages and may not be literate in, for reading and writing purposes, that they can still follow along, but that there was an opportunity there to kind of share that way of printing materials with pictures to other programs that participants were being referred on to, because there was kind of a disconnect with, like, it was working really well within the produce prescription program, but when participants were referred on to other programs, there was less engagement and likelihood to actually participate in those other areas because those materials weren't presented in the same, like, visual picture oriented way.
Okay, okay, last one. Anyone willing to, not me, share for prescription provided? And you don't have to say everything we covered. It can also just be one thing.
Carla, I feel like you had an aha moment of an idea that Juliet suggested.
I thought we did prescription provided already. Did we not?
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
so sorry. Prescription redemption. My
Oh,
bad. Thank you,
yeah,
Marcy.
okay.
Yes, that's what, yes.
Is it prescription redemption?
It is redemption, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so sorry. So Lucy and I worked on the worksheet, and mine completely, all the notes I took got deleted. So she was sending me all of the pages anyway, so I was trying to gather them up. But okay, so we did prescription redemption, and yeah, I was in a small group as well, but powerful. And I had brought up an issue that we're having with the fact that the way the produce prescription started was to focus on locally grown organic food, right? And you wanted to build that partnership with the farmers, build that partnership with local vendors, and continue supporting local business, right? And so now with this new, we were working with About Fresh, and we have a Fresh Connect card, which is making our lives 10 times easier. And it's more convenient for our participants. And now we can extend our 6-month program to a whole year. They're now getting very used to and accustomed to shopping at Walmart, Safeway, and Fred Meyer. And so the issue that I brought up is that how do we continue supporting the local businesses, but also not taking away from the limited resources that our participants have, because they can spend a lot more at Fred Meyer than they can at the farmer's market. Sadly, that's just the way that it is, and we all know that's the way that it is. So we can incentivize a little, we can do some things, but how do we continue that connection that we don't want to lose, right? And Julia gave me some really cool ideas that I didn't even know we could do. One of them was connecting with the managers at Safeway, Fred Meyer, and Walmart. So even though our participants are only going to be shopping with them from November until April, maybe Lucy and I can connect with some of the managers there and be like, hey, if you see a Fresh Connect card, this is what it means to us. This is what it means to our participants. Please be kind to them. Please treat them with respect, and just kind of work with them. And also maybe if they have any questions, the manager can reach out directly to Lucy and I. So I was just like, ding, ding, ding. It was a lot of ideas coming to my mind. So that was really, really helpful, because I was just like, cool, how am I ever going to talk to anybody at Walmart? I mean, it's impossible. But yeah, so thank you, Juliet, again. And that was a great session.
Thank you, Carla, for sharing. Wonderful. Thank you all for sharing. Hearing a snapshot of what transpired in the breakout rooms is so helpful. And we're on our last 15 minutes here, and I just want to leave, this conversation might continue with OCFSN beyond me. I'm so sorry. Can you all hear the wind right now? Right? Oh, wow. Zoom noise canceling is amazing. It's like a wolf howling right here. Like it might as well be right here. But oh, Did I lose share screen? Here we go. Sorry about that, y'all. What I want us to get a chance to talk through, and we'll just do this in the chat, or maybe even if folks are willing to come off mute, we'd love to get a sense of, now that we've spent 2 significant sessions, like rich in the ground, as we named it in last session, looking at your programs, looking at the Fed Community Workbook and seeing where the programmatic alignments are. Let's raise our heads up and look at a bird's eye view about how each of you all in a coalition, in a statewide coalition, see these principles playing out. What does that look like for how OCFSN as a network supports your work? And what does it look like potentially in the future for the influence of OCFSN? What does your participation in it look like? What do you hope OCFSN accomplishes? We did a little brain dump, Kaylee, Jen, have some initial thoughts about ways that OCFSN could be a support, but I won't open that up just yet so that there are not direct feeds to y'all. And if anyone has an imagining, they could just drop it in the chat now or come off mute and share answer to either one of these 2 questions.
I don't have an exact answer, but I think having the support of a network that represents all these different actors within the community food system would be really powerful in addressing the issue that Carla brought up. Like, how do you reach as many participants as possible and make their money go as far as you can, while also lifting up local food and local producers that, you know, want to compensate them fairly, and that often costs more. And so figuring out the math on that one is going to take a lot of different people. And so I feel like that could be something that OCFSN could support or work on.
Thank you for the affirmation, Michelle, that was, you were also +1 that. Go ahead, Carla.
I really enjoyed this type of these types of sessions or workshops. I think that if OCFSN could support us with more things like this, with program managing, like how do we connect? Because I know we always say we're going to connect. Oh, I'm going to reach out to Amber. I'm going to reach out to Kaylee. And then just time flies, emails just get piled up and it doesn't happen. But when I have this on my calendar, I do dedicate the time to this meeting, and it means something to me. It means something to my team. So like, if we could just continue these little workshops and like things like this, I just think it's so beneficial to the people managing these and these programs.
Anyone else want to share something? And you
I
also,
actually,
oh yeah, Jen,
sorry,
yeah,
I kind of have like a follow-up to what Carla just said, just some being on the opposite side of that. And it's listed on the brainstorms list that you're going to share. But what's the best way to kind of communicate with network members and program managers in order to get this involvement in these workshops?
if anyone has an answer.
Yeah, it's not just to Carla, sorry.
No, yeah, I don't want to be the only one talking, but I will just say, like for me, being at the first one, I realized, wow, this is super important. But I think sometimes the emails are so long, and I'm just being very honest and transparent, and I just don't get enough time to get through them all. But once I saw this one, and Lucy and I went to this, we're like, oh my gosh, we have to be at the next one. We're not going to miss it. And so we moved all these appointments, all these meetings we had to be at this next one. And we actually worked on the worksheet together, like on our own time. So we came to this meeting a lot more prepared, which was what you had advised us to do last time. So just things, I think it's just like maybe shorter emails and yeah, and just like directly to us, like, hey, this is what we're offering, and like an alert, like this is for you. This isn't for us. This is for you, just to help you and support you.
I really appreciate that feedback, Carla. Sometimes we're like, oh no, we have to send out this other email, but like trying to really like condense it is and give people enough information so they know what they're signing up for, but not too much to overwhelm. So thank you for sharing that.
Really helpful feedback. And I'll just share that these two questions are also for anyone who does not run a produce prescription program. Like, you all are a part of this network. And so there might be a specific way you see this network being useful, or yourself being supported by it, or you giving to it, that you can surface a name.
As someone that doesn't have a program or isn't a part of a program, Katya and I work at Road Food Unite, so a local nonprofit here in Southern Oregon. And we are not quite sure, we're kind of taking the eagle's eye and attending these meetings to learn more about OCFSN and kind of understand if there is any, collaborative projects or thinking that we can be envisioning together. But I feel like apologizing because we aren't like really being able to dive in and not being a part of a program, but it has been very interesting in hearing just like what people are coming up against within like, these systems that are built to like try to help, but like we're kind of like working with all of those systems. So yeah, we're still learning how OCFSN can support our work and how we can possibly support others.
Yeah, that's really helpful to know. And actually, Jennifer, I think maybe you even inadvertently identified one of the things that OCFSN is doing, is that it's providing information about what's happening statewide and plugging you in to what else is going on. So for right now, if that's the only need you all have to help inform your work at Rogue Food Unites, that's a great service. And I hope OCFSN folks, you all feel the impact of that. It's like, oh, it's sometimes just existing is enough of a value. Having a place for people to come to convene. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share this list. It's don't mind the color coding. It has no reasoning, rhyme or reason. It's just based on who typed at what time. But I will drop it in the chat for you all to have access to. And you are welcome to add to it. And if you do add to it, maybe it'd be just helpful for Kaylee and Jen and the OCFSN working group to know who wrote it. So if you could just leave your name, dash name, some indication.
And I'm not the best note taker sometimes. So actually the ones in blue, I was trying to type out as y'all were just giving feedback. So if you feel like I misrepresented what you had to say, feel free to add more or edit that top section there.
And would just love to know if reading any of these for anyone is clicking like, oh yes, I would want that. If OCFSN can at some point provide that, that would be helpful. Feel free to drop it in the chat or come off mute just in these last few minutes we have together. Wow, yeah. And thank you, Shantae's autopilot, just capturing the summary. This is so helpful.
I know, I'm like, AI is so crazy. I also open up, I know there a bunch of people had to jump off, but this is technically our last session with Maham and Rochelle from DAISA. So if there are folks that have questions in the last couple of minutes that, you know, about the Fed principles or about DAISA's work or whatever you want. What's your favorite color? No.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
It's seafoam green. Just,
Cool.
but yeah, that's a good point, Kaylee. It has been really nice to share this body of work with you all and witness y'all's like what relevance it has to you. That's been very affirming and very informative for us about where to carry it and how to build it out and its applicability. So yes, any questions and reflections, we would love to know.
And our doors are open, so definitely feel free. We can toss our emails in the chat as well. Maham and other colleagues will be working on another version and some related types of materials over the course of this next year. And so there's definitely going to be other opportunities to engage with Fed, both from having other kinds of resources available to you all over time, but also the possibility of engaging in informing what those look like. So if there are ways where you can see this kind of principle or set of principles supporting you all in a process, and you're like, I wish we had this with this kind of language, that kind of feedback could very directly inform some next steps. So feel free to be in touch with us about that.
I had a question. Is anyone
Excuse me.
now?
This, sorry, I'm also sick, which is why I stayed muted most of the time. So I really like the content of this workbook, and I feel like for total, like full-on benefit of this, we needed to be in a space to do a lot more deep dive into the layers of the book, the workbook itself, and that what we've done is kind of like a really good introduction to the Fed workbook. But if we're going to adapt it, that we really need to have more time. And I wondered if there was a potential of us to do a live in-person session where we could actually like go in and write our program, like from our perspective, our experience, our journey with the people that we're serving, and then write it into the book, and then, you know, start that as a part of the plan of action of how we're going to implement it into our program. Sorry.
Michelle, thank you so much for coming off mute to express that. I wanted to conserve your voice, but it was really valuable to hear it. Kaylee and Jen, that might be a question for you both, but I will just offer to just share transparently that that's definitely something we have done before, DAISA teammates have done before, in-person Fed community workbook sessions, like a half day. Or not quite a half day, but yeah, like, yes, an in-person hands-on session. So it's not out of the question.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And please, I know we are beyond time, so if anybody needs to hop off, yeah, thank you all. Just quickly, Michelle, I think there are plans right now for OCFSN to have an in-person convening this fall, with the entire network. And I wonder if, you know, there is a planning survey out there for that event. And if folks want to get involved with that, I wonder if we could have kind of a session around the Fed workbook principles and how they might be applied beyond just produce prescription programs, but also looking at like, I know we have our quarterly meeting scheduled for, or a November one that could also be an in-person one like we did last November too, and really dig into things too. So yeah. Cool. Well, I'm gonna stop recording.